Stop Now, a social experiment enterprise. Hi, and welcome to Stop Now. I'm Nate.
Lisseth, how are you?
She beat you to it, JK. She beat you to the punch.
I was not going to say anything because I wanted to be on the back and be a mute spectator. But anyway, I'm JK. I'm here as well to trouble Lisseth with more questions.
Yes, as you can see, folks, we are back, joined by a friend of the program. She joined us, it was either December or January, the last time we had a conversation with her. But Lisseth London is back. Lisseth, how are you? And for the listeners that or the viewers that missed that episode, can you give us a little bit of background about yourself and your work?
Oh, wow. Okay. So
A lot of questions there.
yeah, I'm like, ooh, how do I go there? So I am Afro-Latina and migrated here to America in 95, been here and have seen firsthand what trafficking and exploitation is.
Mhm.
And my work has literally gravitated to working with immigrants, refugees, and individuals who have been trafficked, both nationally and internationally. My background is in social work and in international psychology with a PhD focusing on trauma services. So my whole focus has been in trauma and how to work with individuals who have not only experienced specific traumatic experiences, but also dealing with historical traumatic experiences, especially since a lot of the data has shown that individuals who've been trafficked or exploited have a history of their parents being exploited. And so that's a little bit about me. I don't know what else to say.
You hit on a lot of good things right there. And there's so many directions I feel like we could go in, particularly with a lot of the stuff that's happened since the last time we talked. But I guess we'll start with what you talked about in terms of immigration and the trafficking. And I think when a lot of people, particularly over the last 4 years, when they look at that issue of immigration, they just kind of see this macro view of it, right? Where it's just brown people crossing the border. But as somebody who has worked with a lot of these folks who have been victimized and who have, gone through the struggle, can you talk a little bit about like the real people behind this issue that gets thrown around every 4 years just for political points?
Ooh, that's true. It always gets thrown out, and there's this whole end trafficking, coalition and things like that going on. And unfortunately, I'm not trying to sound like a Debbie Downer, but this is something that we are unfortunately going to be dealing with for the rest of our lives, unless we continue to actually educate the people so they know the difference. So a little bit about that in regards to your question. There is this stigma that only individuals crossing the borders are trafficked, or they may not be trafficked and they're just coming and using that as a way to get here, to get some type of special treatment. And sadly, that is not true. We and individuals who are wanting to know more can actually go and Google this and go to the actual human trafficking website and see the data itself. We have more individuals being trafficked right now who are native born to America than anything else. And we are seeing that the number have increased since pandemic started, especially minors. So looking at the international aspect of things, individuals are being trafficked because of trust, right? That trust is that component that we really don't talk about. Not only trust, but also the need to protect our own, right? Which is our natural default. No matter what's going on, we will protect our own. So imagine an individual who is in a place where they have no access to food, water, or anything. And if they go out to try to get a job or anything, they can be recruited by gangs, the cartel, they can be kidnapped. And so you have individuals who are fearful of that. And so then someone knocks at your door and says, hey, I found a job. Someone's looking for a nanny. Someone's looking for this.
Mm-hmm.
We will pay you this much a week. Your daughter or your son will have to travel and live in the home, but they will be able to send you money. This is the arrangement and this is what it looks like. No one really second doubts that, because they're already in a situation that is
Right.
like either do this or die, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the clients that I worked with before, that was their story. I don't have any options. My family's in this situation. They didn't want them because they wanted a certain age group. I'm doing this for my family, and then everything goes downhill. So I have seen these two, right? I have seen that one. I have seen the trust of meeting up with someone online and having that connection with them and saying, hey, I'm going on a date, I'm going to coffee, I'm going to whatever. And then that be the end of it. And all of a sudden now they are being trafficked by that individual who they trusted and loved, and now being put in the streets or being sent from hotel room to hotel room. And so it goes back to our defaults, right? The protection of our people and that trust that we really don't talk about. We always talk about everything else, the economy, the politics, but that's the core that we need to talk about.
Something else that you brought up, and again, I'm trying to stay focused, but again, it's every time you give an answer, there's another thing that kind of pops into my head. And something you mentioned earlier, which kind of spoke to me this past week, was the idea of generational trauma.
Yeah.
And I was speaking with a friend of the program who was a therapist, and talking about how Tuesday, the week of the Derek Chauvin verdict, and I was at work, and I had this weight on my shoulders and on my chest that I didn't know what it was from. And I was just kind of carrying it around all day. And then when the verdict came in that afternoon, that evening, it was just like, oh, that's what it was. Just feeling like here's another person that's going to get off for killing somebody that looks like me. And just kind of talking to my sister or talking to my friends online about it, and just all of us having this collective kind of holding our breath moment.
Yeah.
Because that generational trauma of knowing this is what happens to us in America. Like when you kind of see that, like what do you make of just kind of, I guess, the emotional trauma that a lot of people that look like us have gone through, Lisseth?
Yeah. Thank you for bringing it up. I think that this is a topic that we just need to keep talking about more and more. I know that on that day at 4:15, BIPOC communities, right? Black people, Indigenous people of color were able to exhale for the first time. We didn't know why we were so tense, so emotional. And then when we heard that verdict, so many just were able to breathe, and just people were so emotional. The generational trauma, the transgenerational trauma, the historical trauma, whichever way people want to address it, it is a very real thing. And the reason why it's so real, because individuals are not only experiencing this moment of trauma, dealing with what is going to happen, but this little thing is connected to something else. I read on Instagram after the verdict came in, and there was this Black man who is a father of 3 boys. I follow him. His name is, I don't know if I can say the names are here. I don't know. I am Deval. And he and his wife are social media people, but he mentioned that he remembers being 8 years old when the Rodney King situation happened. And he remembered that his father turned to him and had a conversation, letting him know that sometimes that justice is not served, but you still have to hold your head up and try to do good and be, you know, all these things. And so he said the whole day he was having to figure out how he was going to have the same conversation with his son. And so that's what historical and generational trauma is. There's something that is triggered by something that you have experienced, that your parents have experienced. And that is a lineage of things that oftentimes we don't really highlight or want to acknowledge, because if, you know, people are like, oh, if I go and think about it, I'm just going to get really emotional. No, even if you don't think about it, it's okay. Your body recognizes it, your mind recognizes it. And whether or not you want to go there or not, it's going to happen. And so I think that we need to talk about this more, especially for individuals, Black and Brown communities, right? And just individuals dealing with this issue alone, right? This traumatic experience that it is something that they can't even shake themselves. One more thing I'll tell you about it is I've been working with this group out of Nigeria. And one of the things was the lady was saying that there was a whole indigenous IDP camps, right? The refugee camps, that over 20 girls and boys, teenagers, were taken, right? And we were like, wait, what? How did they just take him out of the camp?
Right.
And so we came to found out in the root of it that the parents were approached and told, this is what we're going to give. This is what we're going to provide you. This is better for your children. They shouldn't be living out here, blah, blah, blah. And the parents gave them away. When we talked to the parents, because I told them, we went through the whole assessment. The thing was that the parents, the women, the mothers, were also exploited the same way. And so the children that were taken were the children who were product of their being trafficked and being exploited this way. And so this cycle that continues, right, is what individuals don't really notice or see. So that's what a historical or generational, transgenerational trauma looks like. Something that happens that you feel something is off, but you really don't know what it is because we don't really go back to connect it.
Well, how are some of the ways that we can kind of break that cycle? Because going back to the trial, I don't have kids, but I, got 3 nieces, and we were having a conversation. They're like, and the middle one is like, obviously Uncle Nate, this guy's guilty. We've seen the video, we've seen the evidence.
Yeah.
And on the one hand, like, I wanted to express that that's not always the way things work, baby girl. Like, that's, just my experience and our community's experience. But you also, I think, don't want to, pass on that, I guess, rightfully earned bitterness and skepticism.
Yeah.
So like, how do like I said, I don't have kids, but for viewers out there that may have kids or are trying to have those conversations, like, how do we kind of, if not break that cycle, at least kind of maybe change the trajectory?
Just being honest. I think that in our generations, our people, we kept quiet in certain things. We don't talk about certain things. We just like brush past certain things. And what happens is when they grow up, we are experiencing things that we're like, well, I don't know if so-and-so went through this. Like, I don't know if this is part of my lineage. I don't know, because we really don't talk about it. I think that we have to come to terms with being completely, authentically intentional about talking about what's going on, saying, listen, we want this today, but unfortunately, this is not our norm. And I don't want you to feel like this is a bitter, I want you to be aware that this is why we are so excited about this result, because we have seen this not be the norm. Even though we have seen the evidence show that the person was guilty, oftentimes they're not convicted. And so having that conversation of authenticity is what's going to help them understand not only what they're experiencing right now, so they can put a description, a a key phrase or something that lets them know what, oh, I went through this and this is what that meant. But when they're experiencing later on in life that is connected to something that mom did or dad did or anything else, they can say, oh, I remember that we talked about this and this is what that means. It's not fair about this, but I understand that I need to be like this. So having that conversation, being open and not trying to hide the things, I think is going to be the beginning steps to breaking the cycles in different things.
Lisseth, now we are going on track to hard questions. I'm going to give
okay.
As soon as I saw JK pop up on the screen, I'm like, here we go. Hope you're ready, Lisseth.
I'm ready.
The trouble is going to come in.
Here comes trouble.
You're global consulting, right? So you are a global consultant and you do therapy, or what exactly, like how do you put that? Like what do you do in that? Is it like helping the victims, or is it like helping them rehabilitate their life, or how do you what is that like you do on that front?
Oh, okay. So for individuals, so I provide a behavioral engagement coaching. My background is in understanding the counseling therapeutic side, the theory-based approach to things. The one thing that I've noticed, especially with individuals who are experiencing a cycle of trauma, is that they need more. They need that I'm here with you and walking through in this process while encouraging you to understand your traumas, your triggers, but also create a plan for the future. What is it that you want to do? Yes, we have dealt with this, but where do you want to go? So what I provide is a behavioral engagement coaching approach that assesses the triggers, assesses the trauma. We get to the bottom of the iceberg and kind of connect the trauma itself to how they see their relationships, how they see themselves, how they approach business, how do they approach their spiritual and religious belief and walk. You know, all of this is rooted in our trauma. And then once we understand the trauma and the symptoms, we then go and see, well, okay, so did your family ever experience that? And so while we're talking about this, we are also simultaneously working on, where do you want to go? Now, if you didn't have to deal with this trauma, what do you want to be? Where do you want to be? And so we're actually doing these two things at the same time. So that's basically what I provide to individuals, not only individuals who are victims and survivors, but professionals and organizations. Because when you are working with clients who are traumatized, oftentimes people don't recognize that the staff members who are also traumatized can trigger their clients by just the smallest word. And so my focus is to really focus on the triggers for individuals. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, wonderful. I think I appreciate that, like what you do, and thank you for that. So the hard part, the question I had was, so culturally, right, as Black communities and other Asian communities, we differentiate with the family structures. And to your point on behavioral patterns, right? So when the family itself is disorganized and they are traumatized, as you put it out, like the mother has been a victim of sexual abuse or trafficked, and they carry that like for a long period. How do you expect them like to bring up a child with a proper environment where they also grow up with the traumatizing experience, as Nate was mentioning, like, right, historical Black community being slave trade, and that mindset has already gone in deeper. Like, for example, if I look into the social structure back in India and other countries, right, they have a caste system. They cannot get rid of that like over 1,000 centuries. If you are born in a particular caste or lower caste, you are destined by God. So that is your fate. So how do you come out of that trauma? So you are basically ripped off of opportunities, and you are already seen as a subhuman. And what you have to say about those things, like how is that like easy for a child or even someone who has grown up in that mindset to recover from those things?
So those are four things that I will answer individually, right? So the first thing is the new generation that we are having right now, the millennials, right?
Mhm.
Are a nonsense type of group. They want to know the answer. They want to know, no, this is not working. I'm not going to put up with it. This worked for you. It doesn't work for me. And they're very vocal. And one thing that we have been seeing internationally is that a lot of people are questioning their traditions. A lot of people are saying, okay, well, I want to move away from this. I don't want to do this. Not saying that it is a bad thing or a good thing. I'm just saying that this is the generation, this is the era that we're in. Because we've been exposed to so many things, we have been oversensitized that our norm doesn't no longer help us to be content and at peace anymore. So when you're working with groups where they're from different cultures who have experienced that, who don't necessarily know how to have that conversation with their children, one, due to shame, one, another thing is because of, they were raised, what happens to you keep it to yourself, you don't share. What we have seen is that talking about it in a third person actually helps. What I mean by that, okay, we know that you've been sexually abused and now you have two children. So how do you have a conversation with your two children to make sure that they're aware? And well, here's where they're starting, like, well, so-and-so in the community actually went through something like this. And one of the things that we learn is just to making sure that you guys are aware of this information, what to look for, things like that. So this dissociative sense of like putting it out and not tying yourself to it actually helps individuals to kind of have that authentic conversation without having to put their own emotion to it, but just really focus on the knowledge that needs to be shared. The other thing in your question is that in order for us to really have a impact about what's happening in regards to like traffic and things like that, and looking at it in a cultural competent way, right? We have to understand that this fight against trafficking, it is not a cookie cutter approach. And unfortunately, it has been taken that way, that us fighting trafficking here is the same thing that I'm going to go out there and talk to people in India and people in Gambia and people in Ghana about, and say, hey, let's talk about trafficking. This is bad. This is bad. Unfortunately, even me talking about the story that I told you before, where, hey, we have a nanny job. This is a job that you guys can do. This is normal. This is a normal thing, because even within the countries themselves, you have different classes, like you mentioned, where individuals who are in the lower class go and work for people who are in a higher class within their own region. So it's a normal thing to see someone working for somebody else. I grew up in Panama. I know the different class system. We had individuals come to our house and cook and clean and care for my sister and I. So I understand the differences in that. So I understand also the difficulty in having a conversation to saying that approach is wrong when it's not culturally sensitive or not culturally based. So what comes wrong is when the individual is then asked to do sexual acts, when the person is removed from the family and then not paid accordingly, when the person is then taken and sold to multiple people. So there has to be a distinction between these two things, because when you go out there, everybody feels like, well, you're coming and condemning our way of life. No, I'm not. I'm actually condemning this part. I'm not condemning everything else.
Yeah, Nate. I think she passed the test. You can.
I was waiting to see what JK, if JK had any more in the chamber. But yeah, I think when you kind of think about how everything is so tied into each other, whether you're talking about culturally or economically, which I think is an element of these conversations that gets left out a lot, Lisseth. Like,
Yeah.
people aren't choosing to be in these situations. Like, there's a reason behind a lot of these things. So I guess for you, when we're looking at this issue in 2021, just coming off of a crazy year that we're still kind of in,
Yeah.
in the same situation, like what are some of the issues that you think we can do things about right now? Like, are there steps we can take right now to try to address a lot of these ideas? Are there, again, it's a big question, but are there things in your opinion that we could do right now to start making a change?
Yeah, I think that one, being educated about the topic. Don't just be like, yeah, I'm against it, and you don't know anything about it, right? Which happens all the time. I want individuals to be educated about it, because when the hard question comes and we are asking you to come and participate and asking you to either fund a program, we need you to understand the severity of it. Like, we're asking you for a reason. The other thing that people can do is actually become involved with organizations that are actually doing the work. There are too many organizations. Listen, I will get in a soapbox on this, and I don't want you all to get fired or like get kicked out or whatever. But I'm just saying, there's too many organizations out there that we know that have big names that collect the money, and we are not seeing the work. I have seen it. I have called. Hey, we have an individual that's wanting some support. Some, like, can we have shelter? Can we? And we're busy. We don't have any. We don't have any. But you just got millions and millions of dollars. How are you do not have a bed? Well, we only have 5 beds in this organization. But you have millions and millions of dollars. A person is living off of 19,000, 20,000, living in a small, like, you have millions. So again, don't get me started on this. But I'm saying this is that if individuals want to see a change, work with organizations that are out in the streets, that are working with the individuals and actually doing the work. And if you want to do that, there are many of them. I'm involved with a lot of them, and every time I get off the phone with them, I literally cry, because I'm like, man, I'm so excited that someone actually cares, right? And it's not about the money. Of course, it will be great if they get funded and all these things. I pray for favor upon all of them, but they're doing this because they want to do the work. They're tired of seeing minors being trafficked, being sold from state to state. They're tired, and they're out there doing the work. So how do you change this? Being intentional, being aware, going out there and doing something. Do something. So that's how you can do change.
On that, Lisseth, when you said, right, so the traumatized victim, like when we try to help someone as well, right, or sexually abused people, uh, we get caught up or entangled in that network, right? So how do you balance that out? Because we see that, like, when even with one other psychotherapist, like doctor who is like famous for the God virus. Why I bring that up is like the religious thing. I know you might be having a different opinion on religion and other things. So they have an organization called Recovering from Religion. So they engage a secular psychotherapist to deal with those kind of traumas, because the root cause of all evil arises from the religion, and people who are traumatized by the religious abusers, they still believe in that. So what do you have to say to that?
That unfortunately is bigger than we think. We really don't understand. I love research. I'm a nerd when it comes to that. I'm a nerd when it comes to learning more about trauma. And I am connected with this individual. His name is Chaplain Xavier Justice, off in Washington, D.C. And we are working on this specific training for individuals who have been traumatized in a religious aspect, right? Not only that, but also pastoral staff who are in the field, who are triggering individuals who've been abused by the system itself. And so I think that we as a people don't understand that the aspect of religion and spirituality and the trauma of it all, that's one thing we all have in common, whether we are atheists, whether we are Christian, whether we are anything. That is the one thing we have in common, because everybody was raised believing something, and we have been traumatized by it. Either something that we asked for didn't happen, individuals were abused in the church, like whatever it is, that's the one commonality that a lot of us have. And so when we're talking about this and having a conversation in regards to religion, we have to be kind. We have to be kind. We have to understand that when we are trying to deal with the big issue, oftentimes the bottom of the iceberg is that, I don't trust you. Right. What if I put my faith in you to do this and you betray me? And which again goes back to what I was mentioning before in the aspect of my behavior engagement coaching approach, looking at the symptomology, right? Looking at what is out there. How are you viewing life? How are you approaching individuals, to kind of gauge where it's coming from? And just because you have one trauma doesn't mean that's the only thing you have. That one trauma has evolved into another trauma that has another trauma, and you have like a whole attic full of trauma boxes, and it all stemmed from one, right? It all stemmed from one. And so we have to talk about it. We have to bring that up, especially organizations who are religious based and are trying to combat trafficking, right? And when you are going out there to provide the services to individuals, and the people are saying, well, here, let me help you. And they're like, well, you have to do A, B, and C in order for you to get our services, right? And they're like, nope, I don't want it because the church has hurt me before. And I'm telling you, because we just had a one-on-one meeting with the organization out in Houston about this. There was an organization that went out in the tracks trying to help, and the people are like, they're getting like great toiletries and things like that to the people, and they're like, hey, we have a place for you guys to stay, but these are the requirements. They said no thank you. For a person to say no thank you, to rather be in the streets, to rather deal with the trafficker, to rather deal with all these things, than go into an organization that provides these services, who is religious based, that tells you something. We hold this and nail it as if this is the only way that they can get services and help. And that's why we continue to have individuals who've been traumatized. Oh, I thought you were helping me. I thought that I was a child of God. I thought, because they use these quotes out there, I thought we were supposed to. And then when I tell you, no, I don't want to do that, give me some time, then you tell me no, fine, and you walk away. You ignore me. That's what the trauma is doing. And so it's sad to see. It's sad to see. It's hard to hear. And unfortunately, that's why the individuals don't want anything to do with that.
Yeah, that's why, like, I'm really glad to hear, that you're working with Chaplain Justice, because I do feel like there are, and I grew up in a Christian household. My father was a chaplain in the Navy for many years, and one of the things he always told me, and it stuck with me, and it just came up when you were talking about those individuals, is you have to meet people where they are, not where you want them to be. And I think that one of the issues with modern religion, and maybe it's an issue that's always been there with religion, is the idea that you have to be a certain way to come here. And if you actually read the book, that's not what the book is saying. And so, like, how do we, And again, this
start trouble.
I was gonna say, I'm trying to turn this around. Like not even just speaking about religion, but I feel like there are barriers that are up that are man-made. And one of the things I was thinking about a couple weeks ago was when we saw again the violence against our Asian American brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
And it's like when I was growing up, for whatever reason, there was this friction that didn't feel necessary between my community and, you know, the Asian community across the street. And it's like, I don't see why there's that friction there. And so I guess my roundabout way of trying to tie all these topics together and make sure JK still has a job next week is like in 2021, like, do you feel like some of those walls that were up for the longest time, whether those be religious barriers or racial barriers or sexual barriers, whatever, do you feel like those are starting to come down? Because as we've seen through this pandemic, like, there's not a lot of difference that is separating people right now.
Yeah, they're definitely coming down. People are they're still trying to hold it up amidst trauma and tragic events. But like I said before, because of the generation that we are in with and the era that we are in, there is no longer your wall, my wall. Like, we are wanting to see justice across the board. We want to see humanity across the board. The unfortunate thing that's happening is that a lot of the older generation, the people that they created those walls, are like, wait. No, I built this wall. What do you mean it's coming down? And they're like, but if I can talk to the young generation and say, this is why we did it, then maybe they can see the benefits of this wall so that these walls don't continue to crumble around us. And so that's what's happening. That is literally what's happening, because the new generation say enough is enough. So the old generation says, okay, you saw the trauma, you saw our division, and you didn't want it. So let me be more specific with you. And so let me transfer our historical traumas and why we did this in the first place, so that you can be proud of what we did. Let's hold these walls back up. And so that's why you're seeing a lot of younger individuals are the ones who are causing this violence, right? If you're seeing it, it's because this younger generation is being unfortunately manipulated, right? And brainwashed to hold standards and priorities of things that were skewed in the first place, like, that had no basis.
What popped in my head was, you know, Kyle Rittenhouse, the young, you know, Caucasian kid that took it. He felt it was his duty to protect against these Black and brown protesters, and it's like he's so young. Right, like where, and you would think, like, because I know my nieces have no time for, you know, I try to give them advice, and this is the way things work. They don't have time for me. They got Google. They're like, we know this, Uncle Nate.
Yep.
And it's like I see a lot what you're talking about when you get people trying to hold to the old ways, and they're using these younger individuals. It's like, oh, like, I want them to be. And maybe I don't know if smarter is the word, but I want them to be more informed. I want them to be more empathetic. Like, I don't know how do we solve it if they get these new recruits, Lisseth, like they're replenishing that wall of division.
Yeah, having this conversation, you know, having the conversation about the root of it, why those walls went up in the first place. Because you had what, 3, 4, I mean it just happened in the 60s that finally, right? So I mean, my mother was born in the 60s. She's about to be 60 this year, right? And I'm like, they've been free for my mom's lifetime. You know what I mean? And I'm like, but yet they're not, right? And so when you talk about it, is you have to talk about the root of that. Like, this is the segregation, this is the separation, this is why, and have that conversation. If you notice the language that these individuals have used when they were asked, why did they do it? it's similar to what we've heard before. So which lets us know this is not something that you came up with.
Right.
It's something that someone put in you because they saw that we needed to get somebody out there. And this is what's happening. This is why, and I'm jumping to the trafficking thing again, and forgive me, but this is why we're now seeing that our younger generations, our individuals are trafficking their own age groups. They're the ones who are the individuals who are taking care of those who are being trafficked, right? They have been given the responsibility of this, and they see it as a badge of honor to be doing this. And again, how did you get there to see the selling and exploiting of human beings just the same age as you and your siblings to be okay? And unfortunately, it's all about what they have been told. Hey, I know people are trying to separate this. I know people are trying to take these walls down and say that this is bad, but I'm going to let you know why this is important. I need you to keep going with this. I need you to keep holding on to this because this is our legacy. This is what we're going to do for our family. And that's where we keep getting this cycle and generation of things because they're only passing down the bad. No one's really talking about the authenticity and the realness of the why. We just see the keep this going because, but why was it there in the first place?
The one final question from my side. I don't want to drag this. So Lisseth, what do you have to say about my mask? So as a psychologist, like how do you analyze that? Like, because we are doing a part of social experiment, that being said, how do you see that, like activism or anonymous, or is it something like as a danger? What is your analysis on that?
I am so glad you asked because I have been wondering this since last time. I said, Lord, what is going on? So I'm looking at the mask because you keep going between that and the stop now. You keep going between these two. And when you put this one on, this mask, I'm looking at, okay, there's like mischief, right? Like you're trying to manipulate something and have some type of a control in regards to this. Like I'm present, I'm here, but I'm trying to take your information to do something else. That's what it gives to me. And then you go back to the stop now and I'm like, whew, okay. And then so I was trying to figure out why the mask. And maybe give me your response to why you put the mask. Like what does that have to do with your conversation and topics?
You want to answer that, or you want me to?
I'll let you take this one, JK.
Okay, so we are doing a social experiment. So it's a part of that, and how, as you said, like people perceive it in different ways, like activism and mischief, mistrust. And some people, like even one of the she's a victim and very old lady, so I don't want like to upset her, and so I just took it off. She said, like, I don't want this mask, that's an evil thing, devil thing, like I don't want it in my show. And some people like even kick me out of the meetups, like when I use this mask. So why people find so upset and assume it like to the danger kind of thing when they don't know me and or my intentions, right? And this is mainly to portray that like someone who is a victim who doesn't want to disclose the face. And we had been getting so many stories who have been abused, sexually traumatized, or trafficked victims. So when we bring those stories, we don't want to put the face of that person's. It's just like redacting the victim's name in the documents, right? So that is what like this symbolizes. For us, it's like more of a gay fox anonymous activist mask. That's how we put it up. And it was interesting like to see different people's reactions to it. Some appreciate it and they are okay with it and they do the show, continue with it. And they let us do whatever we want. Okay, fine. What else can you do with me? You can't do anything. So that's the whole story of
It's
it.
almost like a Rorschach test in a way.
Interesting, because for this interview, I actually just like, okay, I had to make Nate bigger and like minimize you because I was like, and I just kept focusing on Nate. I would say, and I appreciate the reason why you guys are using the mask, and I appreciate you guys doing this social experiment in regards to, survivors not having to put their faces out there. I would say, you don't have to take it, but I would say that one thing, if that's what you're trying to do, then I would want to know, then why would a survivor have this mischievous face?
To answer the question, right? So what we are saying is like stop now in the sense, the survivors always, right? The victims always try to be victims all the time, right? So it's easy to play the role of a victim. Don't be a victim. You just be an abuser, right? Try to turn the thing around. You take control of your life, right? You can also do the same thing to other people. As you said, right? Same age group people, the younger people can be mesmerized, brainwashed to do all sort of bad things, like either serve the nation, go to the military, go to the war and kill people, or sell drugs, or do everything, right? So it all boils down at the young age. So the same way, like if you are saying like I'm a victim, how long are you going to keep abusing yourself by playing that victim game? Don't do that. You just have to come out of that. It's a different reverse psychology, I would say, because the one story, that person died. It is so horrifying when we are going to enact those things in life. We need to have this mask. That's the mandatory requirement, I would say. Like our sponsors told us to do this. Like I have no intention of doing this, and some people like even said like you have to show me your face, then only I can give you an interview. And I said like, yes, I can show you my face, right? In private, like we can meet or we can chat or even have a video call. That's not a big deal. Like I have nothing to lose or nothing to hide. But this, as a part of experiment, when you do, you have to it's like acting a play. All right. So that's how like we see that, because we are trying to address bigger issues and pull in a larger weight which we don't think like we can carry it alone. So that's why like we are playing it out.
What's I Please don't take this the wrong way.
No.
You
Go ahead.
mentioned something. You mentioned something about victims having to stop playing or being the victim, right? Unfortunately, that is it's a harmful thing to say, and the reason why I would say that is because if an individual has been abused, trafficked, and it has been 10 years, right? Life has moved on. They have continued to move on. They can also still be a victim and hold on to it because something has not been addressed. So remember when I was talking about the trauma, looking at the bottom of the iceberg, this is what I'm talking about in regards to that. A victim will always be a victim until they choose and say, I'm no longer a victim. And that time frame is up to them. It's not really up to us because we didn't experience what they experienced. And something that, us falling and scraping our knee in front of in front of like our driveway can be hard for us. And we're like, oh my God, it hurts. And then, we're hurting all day. Then the next day it's like kind of still hurting, but not as much. And, as the week goes on, you see a scab and then it falls off and then you have a scar and then you're fine. Right. But what if the individual who fell the same way as you not only fell because they were running for their life? So even though the scab and the scar, everything, they went through the same process of healing like you, their trauma was they were running for their life. So so I would just say that just having that concept of individuals being a victim and having them say, well, no, you don't have, stop being a victim, it's more harmful than good when you tell someone that who have experienced something, because of where their mindset are, what they've had to endure, and which box of trauma they've dealt with and they haven't dealt with yet. And so until they're ready and they have acknowledged the fact that they're no longer a victim, they have the right to still say, no, I'm a victim, and shift from being a victim to a survivor, and from a survivor to a flourishing person, and then just to be an independent person. So that is the phase that they have to go through. And unfortunately, you know, as society, we don't allow them to have that time to do that. Because when you are traumatized like that, it affects you holistically. And you have to deal with the fact that you fell, the fact that your skin is not trying to heal, the fact that your mind was in fear for your life, the fact that you felt like someone would, like, you know, you have to deal with all of these little things, and not only the fact that you fell.
No, I think that's really good in terms of the way where I feel like a lot of times when people talk about trauma, they look at it like, you know, one per person. Like, you know, like you take that ticket at the barbershop when we used to be able to go to barbershops, you know, just one per person. But you're right. And I think I didn't even think about it until you talked about that analogy where there can be multiple things stacked on top of each other at the same time. So I do like there's so much we can get into. So I definitely want, like, I definitely want this to be part 2 of hopefully many more conversations that we have down the road, Lisseth, because I think every time you come on, I've left our conversation thinking about things in a different way. So I appreciate that.
That's good. Thank you.
If our viewers out there, you know, if they've enjoyed our conversation, if they want to learn more about you and some of the work that you do, how is there a way they can reach out to you?
Yes. Info at Lisseth London Global Consulting.com. They can go to my website, is again Lisseth London Global Consulting. I'm on social medias, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And so you can just go there and do an inquiry call to connect with me, kind of go and talk about it, and then just go from there.
Yes. Thank you, Nate. Thank you, Lisseth. Thank you. It's a real honor and wonderful to talk with you again. And hopefully we will be able to talk again sometime when you are available. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Lisseth London, everybody. So I guess for JK, I'm Nate, and we'll see you next time.
Signing off. Bye for now.
Bye for now. I forget how we always end the show.
Stop now. A social and donate.